There's my scene. I'm going to do an underpainting now. And I'm going to try to block in everything just really simple. All this, just big shapes, and even a little bit of the tree over here and some of the mountains. I'm going to do a wipeout. What I call a wipeout technique. So we call a subtractive wipeout technique, which means that I've got a mixture of some liquid and a little bit of burnt sienna, a little bit of blue, and I mix that with some of the liquid like this. So it's fairly loose as far as the paint. Put that in there. Sorry. And you spread it around, just like you're buttering a piece of toast. How about that, huh? But you get it all over. And then I start wiping it. I get my towel and I wipe my brush here. And I want this just to be not too wet, not too. If I take my finger and I can wipe it out, if there's a puddle down here, it's probably too wet. So I'm going to wipe my brush a couple of times. It's kind of a nice big brush. Bigger brush, and I can go back and then just pull up some of it so that it's not so wet, but enough that I can work into it and start subtracting out. All right, now I'm going to start painting the design. So I can do it as simple as this. Here's my mountain level. Here's the ground plane here. We're going to have a tree over here and those two trees over here like this. Okay, and then we start to wipe out the lights. I can keep this pretty simple. I'm going to wipe out the lights here like this. The sky, these trees. These trees are actually going to be a bit lighter. And then I can start to shape things. And even taking my rag, I can wipe with the shape of those mountains like this. And you can see what I'm looking at. I just really simplify these as just boxes and lines, and then I can start to break into these. But I'm thinking in terms of large masses of value. What are the values of everything? I'm going to mix up a little bit more of a dark here. There's a pine tree over here, and I can just keep that pine tree fairly basic shape for now. I can always shape it almost just sort of like I'm placing things. This is the ground level. remember we talk about John Carlson's the theory of angles, where you've got the sky is usually the lighter area. This has got some clouds in it. And you've got the plane of the mountain, which is kind of tilted, so it's going to get some of the sky color. And then you've got the ground plane, which will probably be a little bit lighter right here. Here we got some back trees. It's not quite as dark as the front tree, but see this part that I'm painting in now. This is what Keith Bond talks about, just welding your shapes, your darker shapes. You notice as I pull this back in, all of this, the mountain here is a little bit lighter in value. The sky is lighter. Right now it's kind of blue, but I got clouds. I'm just thinking of the sky as one value right now. And this is going to be a little darker. Even though the photographs kind of lie sometimes, this looks a little too dark, almost as dark as this pine tree back over here. And but I know that there's some distance here. And all of these trees right here, if you squint down, all those trees is going to be one big shape for now. That's for now. Because I can always break those trees into a bigger shape. This is what I talk about. What you see first, paint last, and what you see last, paint first. So what we're seeing last, or what we don't see at all, is the stuff underneath everything, all underneath all the detail stuff. All right, so then here's those two trees. They're a little bit lighter. So I'm going to get a clean brush, and I'm going to see there's those two trees right next to each other, and then the pine tree that's next to that creates a nice dark. And I can shape that later, but I can still do some of that. And then again, here's the back side of that. Now I can get a big blender brush. Look at this thing. Sometimes I just blend everything like this for just kind of brings it back down together. But you can start to see what's happening here in these trees. You can see those two trees right there. I'm just going to think of those as big one shape. I can separate them later. Okay, so I got the value of the sky, the value of the mountain, the value of this middle ground, the trees, this dark tree in the ground here. Now you got the water. The water looks a little bit lighter because it's sort of reflecting some of the sky. So let's put that in. And that water value is no, maybe down in here it might be a little bit lighter than the trees. So see, I'm just taking my clean brush and I wipe it with my and I can lift that out. This is the subtractive method that we're talking about. And we got some of the ground plane up here. We can make that a little darker. So let's make this. So you see, I'm just painting big shapes, abstract shapes. Everything is abstract at this point. I don't even want to think about trees, stuff like that. I just want to think about abstract shapes for right now. And I think I want that mountain just a little. I want it to come up here just a little bit higher. I think that'll be a little more interesting. And I got that all dark. So then I can just get another clean brush. So you just blend that. I get that light value. It sort of shows the distant mountain. Remember, things get lighter as they move away. So you can see this pattern. Okay, so there's the background of mountains. There's the sky. There's the middle ground trees, the water, the front trees that are lighter. And I could divide those if I wanted to. I can see that there's these, you know, these two trunks of tree trunks. And I'll shape this better. But for right now, I can see that those are going to become two trees there. Now if I wanted to shape this to give the little sense of what the trees are doing back there. Sometimes I even use the back end of my brush to scrape out, maybe to draw a little bit. I want that sky just to be a little bit lighter. But you can see how the form of the landscape is taking shape, because the values is what creates the solidity and the underlying forms of what's actually appearing there. It's the old saying goes that value does all the work and then color gets all the credit. As we see the beautiful color on top of this is, see, and you see how that kind of pulls everything together. And again, now we can see, go back to the reference. Sorry, I can't really show these at the same time, but you see how I'm kind of shaping just the tops of these trees back here. Okay. I feel like I want something over here maybe just to balance all of this out. And maybe what that is a little, maybe we've got, well, there's some cars and people down there, but maybe I've got a tree right here. I'll just put it in because we need something over here to kind of balance all this weight here. Right on the shoreline here, the water. So this is pretty much what we're after for that underpainting. It's you know, a lot of times I think we overthink it, and we feel like we have to get a lot more in there than really needs to be. And we can break down these shapes a lot more as we keep working, which we will. Shape the top of this just a little bit more, make it a little bit more like a pine tree. You can start to see the feeling of distance going back, right? Now, if I wanted, I could even start to divide up some of the trees back here a little bit. But you see, when you got everything that's the overall, you know, welding these things together, like there's so many trees back here, but if I squint down, that's one shape for right now. Then it's easier to take that one shape and block out or pull out some of these lighter values and darker values in a subtle way to divide those, rather than try to paint every individual tree first, say on your white canvas. It just doesn't seem to work as well. This is a difficult scene to do. There's so much going on, but you can see how I'm really simplifying it, and I'll come over here so I can show you the two together. You see how abstract and simple that's becoming. That's what we want for that underpainting. That's what we're after. Okay? It's a simple, more simple than you probably would think it to be. And then we can start to divide up the smaller shapes. This goes up into the sky. And I'm going to make these trees a little bit lighter. See how I can just take the side of my brush and I can make those feel a little bit more like a tree. And I like that lighter tree with the blossoms. These have blossoms on them on top of that dark pine tree. So these will become two trees, but they're more, at the moment, they're a lot more combined as this kind of one shape. Now if I want to go back here in the distance, in that middle ground, I want to pull that down just a little bit so that the water is not quite as wide. So this is the ground. This is the foreground here. And if we do have shadows happening, so we could have some darker. See, now I consider these kinds of more like details. And even I can go quite a long ways in just using the wipeout or the one color and just working out the values. You can see how I'm defining these front trees a little bit more by putting the little cast shadows there, and maybe an indication of a branch here or there. Those trunks, probably got the wrong brush for this, but those trunks are fairly dark. So we can put those in pretty dark, like so. And I can play around with this pine tree. I think I'm going to just let it go right off the edge of the... I think that's the better thing to do, is let it go right off the edge. Make this feel a little bit more like a pine tree. Get more paint on my... Come on, Adamson, get some paint on your brush. See, it kind of lifts. See how it's kind of lifting out? If I don't get enough paint on when I'm starting to add, when I want to add some more to this, it'll just lift out. So I'm just putting more paint on. There we go. That's what I wanted. I like that better as it just goes off. And then I'll get my big old blender. Don't you love that? My Bob Ross blender. Beat it up a little bit there. Now you can really start to see the sense of the landscape, even in that simplistic way. Now, if you notice some of these bushes here, some of these, we can start. I'm going to show you how to divide these out now in this bigger space here. See, divide those out. This is the slow is fast method. So there's a tree there. This tree is a little bit lighter, you see, a little bit lighter. There's a dark tree behind it, and there's a lighter tree over here. So we can shape that. For example, that lighter tree, I could pull it out a little bit. I'll just go right on top of this where this pine tree is. I can always bring that back. So that lighter tree is a little bit lighter there. See, I can just see how I'm changing the overall mother value of the whole of all of those trees, and then I can bring out a little bit of light. Then I can add some of the darks. Get a little bit more paint over here. So there's a sort of dark behind that one tree, and I think I'm going to put it so it allows this. I'm going to move that a little bit of a dark back there. I don't want it as dark as this though, right? See, right? If I get it too dark, I want this front tree to be, these are all the same pine trees. This one, But I'm gonna put a couple of darker accents in this one just to remind me that that's darker. So there's a bush, one of these trees back here, right? And then we see some ground shadows from these trees on this ground back there. But again, it's It's a little lighter than this stuff up here. You can see how I'm starting to separate out a little bit this front tree. Can you see how I'm dividing now those different forms? The light against the dark. But again, I'm starting with the basic overall flat shape behind it all. It's just so much easier to do for one, and plus it's more what really is going on out there. And the top of this tree is really quite light. You can start to see those forms appear. And we can call them trees, but I just like to call them forms. You can start to see how they're dividing out here. There's a cast shadow down here on the ground. Okay, and there's a shadow side to this tree, so I'll put that in. This is sort of a, I don't know, look like a kind of a big bushy pine tree back there. But you can start to see now how, and then this is a little darker back here. You see I'm putting a dark note there to let that light pop out. And I'll show you the photo here in just a minute to show you what I'm doing. But see, there's so much you can do without even getting to the color. This is going to be so much better when I get to the color, which I'll show once I get to it. But now you can see how I'm starting to see some of those forms. And there they are. That tree there, and see the dark. You can see the dark back here. And it allows that light to come out, and see this, the light top here. I'm putting a little bit of the dark behind it now. You can see the light and the dark. And I'm just thinking in shapes. I'm not thinking trees yet. I'm just thinking in shapes. The reason why I keep going back over this, because my paint's just a little bit wet, but I like this because it kind of goes back, and see how it sort of blends just a tiny bit, and it blends everything back together. Now we're starting to really see the landscape coming together now. And I'm still leaving the background mountain one value, even though this is the important part, folks. This is the important part. Even though I see all of this stuff going on. Remember that first statement is sort of what would be a commonality between the light of the snow, the bluish of the mountain. If I were just to squint down, something right between that becomes the one value for the whole thing. And then I can start to divide out the mountain. Now, if I wanted to show a little bit of value changes, this would be the time to do it. But the painting is about these trees. So if I do too many things in the mountain, then it's going to start saying, well, it's about the mountain. I want it to be more about those trees there. So I don't want to distract from the focal points here. As a matter of fact, this is going to be my main focal point. This will be the second one. I'm going to see how this one's just a little bit lighter here naturally. Maybe I'll put that in right now just because that'll tell us. This is going to be, and maybe if I take this the corner of my towel, this is why it's called Wipeout. You see, I can see. Look at that. I can really, I can make some form and dimension before I even get to the color. See, I can lighten some of those, so the tree really starts to stand out a little bit more. Just a little bit. Maybe I'll have it so it's a little bit in front of this one. Maybe they're right next to each other in this photo, but maybe. So now it's starting to show a little more form in that tree. But if I wanted to put the snow up here on these mountains, there's a bit of a shape going on. I live right at the foot of this is Mount Olympus, and it's got a real distinct look. I'm drawing now where the these canyons come out like this in that mountain. And this is all a bit more light because it's got some snow on it. And you got to decide, you got to say to yourself, well, is that snow lighter than the sky? Or is it about the same? Or, well, the sky's got clouds and it's a blue sky. I could make the snow lighter, but right now, I think I'm just going to make it, I'm going to keep the sky lighter. And I can cut into the mountain range to shape it a little bit. See the top of that? And then I can cut down here a little bit. I love working negatively like this and negative out because my left brain doesn't know what to do with that. Some kind of a right brain activity. So I can shape the mountain now. I'm just using a paper towel. How's that? Painting with a paper towel. Who would have thunk of that, right? But it sure works. Whoops, I'm going to get out of there. So you can see the shape of the mountain. I've got a little bit of a sense of the snow. Maybe I have a bit of a place there where it's a little bit lighter with the snow. Fingers can even work too. I usually like to use the glove part though. So we can see a little bit of that happening there. The ground light here is a little bit lighter, so I'm taking that out. I want this to, see, this opens it up a little bit. This is the ground of the middle ground, see behind the trees. All right. I like to show that. So this is the ground plane that's kind of going back. Again, here's the edge of the water. This is going to be the water for now. I'm going to put a bit of a branch in here because this is going to be my focal area. I'm going to play around a little bit with these. I want to get a feeling of some sort of a tree-like thing here. See, these are details, and I haven't even gotten to color yet. I could take this all the way and not even get to color and learn a lot about. But you see how it all started with those big flat shapes and how I'm starting to define things. Now you can start to define things out of those big flat shapes, like so. So now you can see how things are happening. We got the trees here, the darker tree. This is our focal area. We got those. These are still a little bit too dark. I can lighten those up just a little bit. And here's my reference again. But you can see how I've got everything there, but you don't need a lot of that detail to really have a powerful statement of that landscape. All right.